The sound of gunfire echoed through the canyon as Sarah Chen adjusted her grip on the pistol, her breathing steady despite the chaos erupting around her. What had started as a quiet Sunday morning at Precision Valley shooting range had descended into something that would be talked about for years to come. The 20 clay pigeons launched simultaneously into the desert air, their orange discs catching the New Mexico sun like tiny suns against the brilliant blue sky. Sarah's eyes tracked each target with the calculated precision of someone who had spent years perfecting an art that most people never truly understood. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 20 shots. 20 targets. And absolutely everyone watching believed she would fail. The irony wasn't lost on her that just 30 minutes earlier, she had been physically escorted from this very range by security guards, who treated her like she was some kind of safety hazard. The same men who now stood slack-jawed behind the firing line, watching her demonstrate skills they couldn't even comprehend. But this moment, this perfect convergence of opportunity and vindication, was the culmination of years of quiet expertise being dismissed, overlooked, and systematically undervalued. Sarah had learned long ago that the world preferred its experts to look a certain way, sound a certain way, and carry themselves with a particular kind of swagger. She possessed none of these superficial markers. What she did possess was something far more valuable and infinitely more dangerous. The kind of technical mastery that could only be earned through years of dedicated practice, mathematical precision, and an almost supernatural understanding of ballistics, wind patterns, and human psychology. As the first clay pigeon exploded in a shower of orange fragments, Sarah's mind was already calculating the trajectory of the 19th target, her muscle memory guiding adjustments that happened faster than conscious thought. This wasn't just about proving a point anymore. This was about revealing a truth that had been hidden in plain sight for far too long. The morning desert air carried the scent of sage and gunpowder as Sarah Chen parked her modest Honda Civic between two lifted pickup trucks in the parking lot of Precision Valley shooting range. The facility sprawled across 15 acres of New Mexico wilderness, its weathered buildings and shooting bays carved into the landscape like a monument to American marksmanship culture. Sarah gathered her equipment bag from the trunk, a worn canvas messenger bag that had seen better days, and walked toward the main building with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she was going. The range's lobby buzzed with the usual Sunday morning crowd, groups of friends planning their shooting sessions, fathers teaching teenage sons about firearm safety, and clusters of tactical enthusiasts comparing the merits of various rifle configurations. Sarah approached the registration desk where a heavily tattooed man named Duke presided over the sign-in process with the authority of someone who had probably never met a regulation he couldn't bend. "Morning," Sarah said politely, placing her membership card on the counter. "I'd like to reserve Bay 7 for precision rifle practice." Duke glanced up from his magazine, took in Sarah's appearance with a quick visual assessment, and frowned. She was petite, maybe 5'4" in her worn hiking boots, with shoulder-length black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her clothing was functional rather than fashionable. Khaki cargo pants, a navy blue polo shirt, and a lightweight jacket that showed no brand logos or tactical patches. To Duke, she looked like someone who had wandered into the wrong establishment. "You sure you're in the right place, miss?" Duke asked, his tone carrying the kind of condescending helpfulness that suggested he was doing her a favor by questioning her presence. "We've got a nice little .22 range around back that might be more your speed, perfect for beginners." Sarah maintained her neutral expression, though something flickered behind her dark eyes. "I'm not a beginner. I've been a member here for 3 years. I'd like Base 7, please." Duke consulted his computer screen with exaggerated skepticism. Base 7 is our precision rifle range. That's for serious shooters working with high-powered equipment. You got experience with long-range shooting? Because if you haven't been properly trained, I can't let you back there. Insurance liability, you understand." "I understand insurance liability," Sarah replied quietly. "I also understand that my membership gives me access to all range facilities, provided I demonstrate proper safety protocols. Would you like to see my certifications?" Before Duke could respond, a boisterous laugh erupted from a group of men gathered near the ammunition display. The sound drew both their attention to a cluster of 5 shooters who clearly knew each other well. They wore matching tactical vests loaded with magazine pouches, knife clips, and communication equipment that suggested they took their hobby very seriously indeed. The apparent leader of the group was a man named Travis McKenzie, whose imposing physical presence was amplified by the kind of gear that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His rifle case alone probably contained equipment worth several $1,000s, and his confident swagger suggested he was accustomed to being the most skilled shooter wherever he went. "Duke, my man," Travis called out, approaching the registration desk with the easy familiarity of a regular customer. "We need the precision bays for a little competition shooting. Some serious long-range work that requires real equipment and real expertise." Travis noticed Sarah standing at the counter, and his expression shifted to the kind of polite condescension that suggested he was about to offer helpful advice to someone who clearly needed it. "Ma'am, if you're looking to learn some basic shooting skills, there are some excellent beginner classes offered on weekday mornings. Much safer environment for someone just starting out." Sarah turned to face Travis, her expression remaining perfectly neutral, despite the familiar pattern of assumptions playing out before her. "I'm not just starting out. I'm a range member requesting access to facilities I'm qualified to use." Travis exchanged a knowing look with his companions, and Sarah could practically hear the mental calculations happening behind their eyes. Small woman, modest equipment bag, no visible tactical gear, speaking in a quiet voice without the kind of aggressive confidence they associated with serious shooters. The conclusion was inevitable and completely wrong. "Listen, miss," Travis continued, his tone taking on the patient quality of someone explaining something obvious to a child. "Long-range precision shooting isn't just about pointing and pulling the trigger. It requires understanding of ballistics, wind compensation, elevation adjustments, and equipment that costs more than most people's cars. It's a technical discipline that takes years to master." "You're absolutely right," Sarah agreed. "It is a technical discipline that takes years to master." Travis smiled, apparently pleased that she was being reasonable. "Exactly. So maybe start with some basic marksmanship training, work your way up through the shorter ranges, and eventually, after you've developed the fundamental skills, you might be ready for more advanced shooting." Duke nodded approvingly. "That's exactly what I was telling her. We've got a nice setup for beginners. Much more appropriate." Sarah looked between the two men, recognizing the familiar dance of expertise being dismissed without examination. She had encountered this pattern in academic conferences, professional consultations, and technical discussions throughout her career. The assumption that competence must announce itself through specific visual markers, that expertise should be loud and aggressive rather than quiet and precise. "I appreciate your concern for my safety," Sarah said carefully. "However, I have the necessary qualifications and experience. I'm requesting access to Base 7 because I need the distance and target systems for the work I'm doing." Travis's expression hardened slightly. "What kind of work would that be exactly?" "Ballistics research," Sarah replied simply. "I'm working on some trajectory calculations that require precise measurement at extended ranges." One of Travis's companions, a man named Rick Hoffman who owned a local gun store, laughed outright. "Ballistics research? Lady, you realize that actual ballistics research is done by people with advanced degrees in physics and engineering, right? It's not something you can just decide to do because you watch some YouTube videos." Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I have a PhD in applied physics from Stanford, with a specialization in projectile dynamics and atmospheric interference patterns. I've published 17 peer-reviewed papers on ballistics modeling, and currently consult for 3 defense contractors on trajectory optimization systems." The sudden silence that fell over the group was almost audible. Travis and his companions exchanged uncertain glances, clearly unsure how to process this information. Duke stared at Sarah with the expression of someone trying to reconcile conflicting datasets. "Well," Travis said finally, his tone becoming slightly defensive, "having book knowledge is one thing, but practical shooting skills are completely different. You can understand the theory all you want, but if you can't actually hit targets consistently, the academic stuff doesn't matter." Rick nodded vigorously. "Exactly. I've seen plenty of so-called experts who could quote ballistics tables all day, but couldn't hit the broadside of a barn when it came to actual shooting. Theory and practice are 2 different animals." Sarah recognized the shift in their argument. Unable to dismiss her academic credentials, they were now questioning her practical skills. It was a predictable escalation that she had encountered countless times in her professional life. The goalpost would continue moving until they found something they could use to justify their initial assumptions. "You're right that practical application is important," Sarah acknowledged. "That's why I'm here to practice." Travis stepped closer, his body language becoming more assertive. "Look, I don't want to be a jerk about this, but precision shooting is a serious business. When you're working with high-powered rifles at extended ranges, mistakes can be dangerous. Not just for you, but for everyone else on the range. Maybe you should start with some supervised sessions. Work with an instructor who can make sure you're handling everything safely." "I don't need supervision," Sarah replied, her voice remaining level despite the growing tension. "I need access to the range facilities I'm qualified to use." Duke, sensing the escalating conflict, decided to intervene with what he probably thought was a reasonable compromise. "Tell you what, miss, why don't you start with the intermediate range today? Show us what you can do at 200 yards, and if you demonstrate proper safety and decent accuracy, we can talk about the precision bays next time." Sarah looked at Duke with an expression that suggested she was calculating something complex. "I've been shooting at this range for 3 years without a single safety incident. My membership is current, my certifications are valid, and I'm requesting access to facilities I'm legally entitled to use. Are you refusing service based on your assumption about my abilities?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Duke's face reddened as he realized the legal implications of what Sarah was suggesting. Discrimination based on gender or appearance could result in serious consequences for the range, and Sarah's carefully chosen words indicated she understood exactly what grounds she was standing on. "Now, hold on," Travis interjected, his voice taking on an edge of irritation. "Nobody's discriminating against anybody. We're just concerned about safety. This is a private business, and they have the right to make sure everyone follows proper protocols." "Absolutely," Sarah agreed. "So let's follow proper protocols. I'll demonstrate weapons safety, range protocol compliance, and shooting competency. If I meet the established standards, I get access to the facilities. If I don't, I accept whatever restrictions you want to impose." Travis and his companions exchanged glances. They had backed themselves into a corner with their insistence on safety and competency standards. Sarah was calling their bluff, essentially offering to prove her skills right now, in front of everyone. "Fine," Travis said, his tone suggesting he was doing her a favor. "But we're talking about real shooting here, not plinking at paper targets from a bench rest. If you want to use the precision bays, you need to demonstrate precision shooting skills." "What did you have in mind?" Sarah asked. Rick Hoffman stepped forward, apparently seeing an opportunity to end this discussion decisively. "Clay pigeon competition. Moving targets at various distances. If you can consistently hit flying clays with a rifle, you've got the tracking skills and marksmanship ability for precision work. If you can't, then you stick to the basic ranges until you develop the necessary competency." Sarah considered this proposal. Clay pigeon shooting with rifles was significantly more challenging than traditional trap or skeet. The targets moved unpredictably through three-dimensional space, requiring rapid target acquisition, precise lead calculations, and split-second timing. It was exactly the kind of practical demonstration that would either vindicate her claims or expose them as academic posturing. "How many targets?" Sarah asked. Travis smiled, sensing victory. "Let's say 10 clay pigeons. If you can hit 7 out of 10 moving targets with a rifle, consistently, then you've proven you have the skills for precision work." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "Make it 20 targets," Sarah said quietly, "and I'll hit all of them." The statement landed like a challenge thrown down at a medieval tournament. 20 clay pigeons, launched one after another or simultaneously, represented a level of shooting difficulty that even experienced marksmen found challenging. Travis's smile widened, but there was something predatory about it now. 20 targets, all hits? He repeated. "You understand that professional competitive shooters sometimes miss 1 or 2 out of 20, right? And they're using specialized equipment designed specifically for clay shooting." "I understand the difficulty," Sarah replied. "Do we have an agreement?" Duke leaned forward on the counter, suddenly interested in the developing competition. "What happens if you miss more than, say, 3 targets?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "If I miss more than 3 targets, I'll accept restriction to the basic ranges for the next 6 months. I'll also pay for everyone's range time today." Travis laughed, a sound that carried genuine amusement now. "And if you somehow manage to hit 17 or more targets? Then I get unrestricted access to all range facilities, an apology for questioning my qualifications, and your acknowledgement that expertise doesn't always look the way you expect it to." The challenge was officially issued and accepted. Word spread quickly through the range's Sunday morning crowd as shooters began gathering to witness what promised to be either an impressive demonstration of marksmanship or a humbling lesson in the difference between confidence and competence. Sarah walked to her car to retrieve her rifle case while Travis and his companions set up the clay pigeon launching system. The conversations happening around the range were a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and anticipation. Most of the observers seemed to expect Sarah to fail spectacularly, though a few veteran shooters noted that anyone confident enough to accept such a challenge might possess skills that weren't immediately apparent. When Sarah returned with her equipment, the crowd's skepticism deepened. Her rifle case was a standard, soft-sided bag, not the hard-shell, foam-lined cases that serious precision shooters typically used. When she opened it and removed her rifle, the weapon that emerged was notably unremarkable. It was a Remington 700N, 308 Winchester, a common hunting rifle that could be found in any gun store in America. The scope was decent quality but not exotic, and the stock showed signs of use rather than the pristine condition of a specialized competition weapon. To the assembled crowd, it looked like the kind of rifle that weekend hunters used for deer hunting, not the precision instrument that serious long-range shooters would choose. "That's your precision rifle?" Rick Hoffman asked, unable to hide his amusement. "Lady, I've got hunting rifles in my store that are more specialized than that." Sarah began her pre-shoot inspection with methodical precision, checking the rifle's action, examining the scope's clarity, and running through safety protocols with the automatic competence of someone who had performed these actions thousands of times. "It's adequate for the task," she replied without looking up. Travis shook his head in amazement. "You realize you're about to attempt one of the most challenging shooting demonstrations possible with a basic hunting rifle and no specialized equipment? Clay pigeons move fast, change direction unpredictably, and provide a target area smaller than your fist. Professional competition shooters use specialized guns, custom ammunition, and years of dedicated practice." "I'm aware of the challenges," Sarah said, completing her rifle inspection and chambering a round. "Are we ready to begin?" Duke had positioned himself at the clay pigeon launcher, a mechanical device capable of throwing clay discs at various angles and speeds. The targets would be launched one at a time, giving Sarah approximately 3 seconds from launch to impact with the ground to acquire and engage each target. The crowd gathered behind the firing line, their conversations subdued as the reality of what they were about to witness settled in. 20 consecutive moving targets represented a level of shooting difficulty that few of them had ever attempted, let alone mastered. Even if Sarah possessed legitimate skills, the odds were heavily stacked against success. "First target ready!" Duke called out. Sarah shouldered her rifle with fluid motion, her stance balanced and natural. Through the scope, she tracked the empty sky where the clay pigeon would appear, her breathing steady and controlled. The launcher released with a sharp mechanical snap, sending the orange clay disc arcing across the desert sky. Sarah's rifle tracked smoothly, leading the target by precisely the right amount to compensate for its speed and trajectory. The shot cracked across the range, and the clay pigeon exploded in a shower of orange fragments. "Hit," called the range safety officer, his voice carrying a note of professional respect. The crowd murmured appreciatively. One successful shot proved nothing except that Sarah wasn't completely incompetent, but her technique had been smooth and confident. Travis nodded grudgingly, though his expression suggested he expected the consistency to break down quickly. "Second target, ready!" The second clay pigeon launched at a different angle, curving to the right as it reached the peak of its arc. Sarah adjusted her tracking, compensated for the wind that had picked up slightly, and fired. Another explosion of orange fragments. Hit. By the fifth target, the crowd's murmurs had died away entirely. Sarah was shooting with mechanical precision, her target acquisition smooth and her shots perfectly timed. Each clay pigeon disintegrated at the optimal point in its trajectory, suggesting she was calculating lead times and flight paths with mathematical accuracy. Travis found himself studying Sarah's technique with growing unease. Her rifle handling was flawless, her breathing controlled, and her shot timing indicated an understanding of ballistics that went far beyond casual recreational shooting. This wasn't luck or beginner's fortune. This was the demonstration of highly developed technical skills. 10th target ready! Halfway through the challenge, Sarah had not missed a single clay pigeon. The fragments of orange clay scattered across the desert floor like confetti, each one representing a shot that required split-second timing and precise calculation. The crowd had grown completely silent, watching with the focused attention reserved for extraordinary demonstrations of human skill. Rick Hoffman leaned over to Travis and whispered, "She's making this look easy. I've never seen anyone track moving targets that smoothly." Travis nodded grimly. He was beginning to realize that he had seriously underestimated the quiet woman who had walked into their range that morning. Her academic credentials were legitimate, her practical skills were exceptional, and her confidence had been based on competence rather than bravado. 15th target ready? 3/4 of the way through the challenge, Sarah's consistency remained perfect. 15 clay pigeons had been launched, and 15 had been destroyed with clinical precision. Her rifle was performing flawlessly, her technique was unwavering, and her mental focus showed no signs of pressure or fatigue. The mathematical impossibility of what the crowd was witnessing began to sink in. Random chance could not account for 15 consecutive hits on moving targets. This was the demonstration of skills that had been developed through years of dedicated practice, and refined through technical understanding that few recreational shooters ever achieved. 20th target ready! The final clay pigeon launched high and fast, catching a crosswind that sent it tumbling unpredictably through the air. It was the kind of difficult shot that even experienced shooters might miss, requiring instantaneous adjustment from multiple variables and perfect timing to intercept the target before it hit the ground. Sarah tracked the erratic flight path, calculated the intercept point, and fired. The clay pigeon exploded in the largest shower of fragments yet, disappearing so completely that only orange dust remained visible against the blue sky. Hit! 20 targets, 20 hits. The silence that followed was complete and profound. Not one person in the assembled crowd had expected to witness perfect performance on such a challenging shooting demonstration. Sarah had not just met the standards they had set, she had exceeded them with a display of marksmanship that bordered on the supernatural. She saved her rifle, ejected the remaining ammunition, and turned to face the crowd with the same quiet composure she had maintained throughout the entire demonstration. Her expression showed neither triumph nor vindication, just the calm satisfaction of someone who had performed exactly as she had expected to perform. Travis stared at her with something approaching awe. That was incredible shooting. I've never seen anyone hit 20 consecutive moving targets with that kind of consistency. Thank you, Sarah replied simply. Duke emerged from behind the launching mechanism, shaking his head in amazement. Ma'am, I owe you an apology, and you've earned unrestricted access to any range facility you want to use. I've been running this range for 15 years, and I've never seen shooting like that. Rick Hoffman approached Sarah with the expression of someone whose entire worldview had just been challenged. Where did you learn to shoot like that? That wasn't just good marksmanship. That was world-class competitive-level skill. Sarah began packing her rifle away with the same methodical precision she had used to prepare it. I learned the same way everyone learns difficult skills, through practice, study, and dedication to technical excellence. The same way I learned physics, mathematics, and ballistics theory. Travis found himself struggling to reconcile the quiet, modest woman before him with the extraordinary demonstration of skill he had just witnessed. But why didn't you just tell us you were a competitive shooter? Or mention your achievements? We would have treated you differently if we had known. Sarah paused in her equipment packing and looked at Travis with an expression that was both patient and pointed. Mr. Mackenzie, I told you I had a PhD in applied physics with a specialization in projectile dynamics. I told you I had published research on ballistics modeling and consulted for defense contractors. I told you I had 3 years of experience at this range without safety incidents. What exactly should I have said differently? The question hung in the air like the smoke from her rifle shots. Travis realized, with uncomfortable clarity, that Sarah had provided every credential and qualification that should have mattered. The problem hadn't been her failure to communicate her abilities. The problem had been their failure to listen. "I guess," Travis said slowly, "we made some assumptions that weren't fair." "You made assumptions based on what you expected expertise to look like," Sarah corrected gently. "But expertise doesn't always announce itself with aggressive confidence or expensive equipment. Sometimes it's quiet, methodical, and more concerned with results than recognition." Duke stepped forward, his face red with embarrassment. "Ma'am, I want to formally apologize for questioning your qualifications. You've demonstrated skills that frankly exceed those of most of our regular members. Bay 7 is yours whenever you want it, and if anyone gives you trouble in the future, you just come find me." Sarah shouldered her equipment bag and smiled for the first time that morning. "I appreciate that, Duke, and I hope this serves as a learning experience for everyone. Competence comes in many forms, and it's worth taking the time to recognize it regardless of how it's packaged." As she walked toward the parking lot, the crowd of observers began dispersing, their conversations buzzing with analysis of what they had just witnessed. Several shooters approached Travis and his companions, asking pointed questions about their initial treatment of Sarah and whether they had learned anything from the experience. Travis found himself in the uncomfortable position of having to explain how he had dismissed a world-class shooter based on superficial judgments. The story would spread throughout the shooting community, becoming a cautionary tale about the dangers of assuming that expertise must conform to expected stereotypes. But as Sarah drove away from Precision Valley shooting range that Sunday morning, she reflected on something more important than personal vindication. Her demonstration had been witnessed by dozens of people who would carry the story forward, sharing it with friends, family, and fellow shooters. Each telling would reinforce the same message. Competence exists in forms that often go unrecognized, and the wisest approach is to evaluate people based on their actual abilities rather than their superficial appearance. The 20 clay pigeons had been more than targets. They had been assumptions, stereotypes, and dismissive attitudes that had been shattered as completely as the orange fragments scattered across the desert floor. And in their destruction, something more valuable had been created. The recognition that expertise deserves respect regardless of how quietly it presents itself. The incident at Precision Valley shooting range should have been the end of the story. Sarah Chen had proven her exceptional marksmanship skills, earned the respect of the facility's staff, and established her credentials beyond any reasonable doubt. But in the interconnected world of shooting sports and tactical communities, stories like hers had a way of taking on lives of their own, spreading through social media, gun forums, and word-of-mouth networks until they reached people who felt personally challenged by the implications. 3 weeks after her perfect performance on 20 clay pigeons, Sarah received an unexpected phone call that would transform a simple demonstration of competence into something far more significant. The caller identified himself as Marcus Webb, president of the Southwest Regional Shooting Association, and organizer of what he described as the most prestigious marksmanship competition in the four-state area. "Dr. Chen," Webb began, his voice carrying the careful courtesy of someone making an important business proposition. "I've been hearing some remarkable stories about your recent performance at Precision Valley. Word is that you accomplished something that most competitive shooters would consider impossible." Sarah set down her morning coffee and leaned back in her home office chair, surrounded by the ballistics research that paid her bills and the shooting trophies that nobody ever asked about. Through her window, the New Mexico landscape stretched toward distant mountains, the same desert environment where she practiced the skills that had apparently become the subject of regional conversation. "Mr. Webb, I simply demonstrated the marksmanship abilities I've developed over many years of practice. I'm not sure why that would be considered remarkable." Webb chuckled, though there was something calculating in the sound. "Dr. Chen, hitting 20 consecutive moving targets with a standard hunting rifle isn't just remarkable. It's the kind of performance that makes people wonder if the stories are being exaggerated in the telling. Some folks in the competitive shooting community are suggesting that maybe the challenge wasn't as difficult as it's been described." Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the recognition of a pattern she had encountered throughout her professional life. Her achievements were being questioned not because they lacked evidence, but because they didn't fit comfortable assumptions about who should be capable of such excellence. "The performance was witnessed by more than 30 people," Sarah replied carefully. "The range safety officer documented every shot. If there are questions about what happened, I'm sure Duke Morrison at Precision Valley would be happy to provide details. Oh, I'm not questioning that something impressive happened, Webb said quickly, but you understand how these stories grow in the telling. What might have been very good shooting gets described as perfect shooting. What might have been favorable conditions gets left out of the story. People start to wonder about the full context. Sarah recognized the subtext immediately. Webb wasn't calling to congratulate her on exceptional marksmanship. He was calling to suggest that her achievement had been somehow artificial, that the conditions or circumstances had made her success easier than it appeared. It was the same dynamic she had encountered in academic peer review, where groundbreaking research was often met with suggestions that the methodology must have been flawed or the data somehow contaminated. What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Webb? I'm suggesting an opportunity, Webb replied, his tone becoming more animated. The Southwest Regional Championship is held every year in October. Right here in Albuquerque, we feature competitions in multiple categories: precision rifle, practical shooting, tactical scenarios, and our signature event, the Masters Challenge. It's where the region's best shooters prove their skills under official conditions, with certified judges and documented results. Sarah waited for him to continue, sensing that this conversation was heading towards something that would require careful consideration. The Masters Challenge, Webb continued, is designed to test every aspect of advanced marksmanship. Multiple shooting positions, varying distances, different target types, time constraints, and environmental factors. It's the kind of comprehensive evaluation that separates genuinely elite shooters from people who might have gotten lucky in one specific situation. The implication was clear and insulting. Webb was suggesting that Sarah's perfect performance at Precision Valley had been a fluke, a one-time success that wouldn't hold up under more rigorous testing. He was offering her the opportunity to prove her abilities in a more official setting, with the clear expectation that she would fail to live up to the stories that had been circulating about her skills. "And you're inviting me to participate in this competition?" Sarah asked. "I'm inviting you to settle the question once and for all," Webb replied. "If you're truly capable of the kind of shooting that's been described, then the Masters Challenge should be well within your abilities. If, on the other hand, your success at Precision Valley was the result of favorable conditions or beginner's luck, then a more comprehensive evaluation will reveal that." Sarah found herself in a familiar position, being challenged to prove abilities that should have been accepted based on the evidence already provided. It was the academic equivalent of having a published research paper questioned by people who hadn't read it, or having professional recommendations dismissed by individuals who had never worked in her field. "Mr. Webb, I'm curious about something. How many other shooters have you personally called to invite to your Masters Challenge? Do you typically recruit participants by suggesting that their previous achievements might have been flukes?" The silence that followed suggested that Webb hadn't expected such a direct challenge to his approach. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted slightly, becoming more defensive. "Dr. Chen, the shooting community takes excellence seriously. When stories circulate about extraordinary performances, naturally there's interest in verification. The Masters Challenge provides that verification in an official, documented format." "I see. And what happens if I decline your invitation?" Webb's answer came quickly, suggesting he had anticipated this question. "Then I suppose people will draw their own conclusions about whether you're confident in your abilities under more challenging conditions." Sarah understood the implicit threat. Declining the invitation would be interpreted as evidence that she lacked confidence in her skills, that she was afraid to submit to more rigorous evaluation. The story of her refusal would spread through the same networks that had carried news of her original achievement, undermining her credibility and reinforcing stereotypes about her capabilities. "What are the specific parameters of this Masters Challenge?" Sarah asked. Webb's tone brightened, apparently sensing movement toward acceptance. 50 targets total, arranged in 5 different scenarios. 10 precision shots at 600 yards on paper targets. 10 clay pigeons launched at various angles and speeds. 10 tactical targets that simulate real-world shooting situations. 10 shots in a timed practical shooting course. And finally, 10 targets in what we call the chaos round, where shooters face unexpected challenges designed to test adaptability and skill under pressure. Sarah calculated the mathematical probability of success across such a diverse range of challenges. Each scenario tested different aspects of marksmanship, from the pure technical precision required for long-range paper targets to the rapid decision-making needed for tactical situations. The overall difficulty was significantly higher than anything she had attempted in a single session. "What's the entry fee?" she asked. "For someone of your reported abilities, we'd waive the standard entry fee. Consider it a professional courtesy. However, there would be some additional considerations." Sarah recognized the pause as preparation for the real proposition, the terms that would make this challenge more than just a shooting competition. Such as? "Well, given the attention your story has generated, there's considerable interest in seeing you compete. We're expecting television coverage from 2 regional sports networks, and several national shooting publications have expressed interest in covering the event. It would be quite a showcase for your abilities." Sarah understood immediately. Webb wasn't just organizing a shooting competition, he was staging a spectacle. Her participation would draw media attention and crowd interest, turning her skills into entertainment. If she succeeded, the attention would be focused on the extraordinary nature of her achievement. If she failed, the coverage would emphasize the gap between reputation and reality. "Mr. Webb, it sounds like you're more interested in creating a media event than conducting a fair evaluation of marksmanship skills. Dr. Chen, excellence deserves recognition. If you possess the abilities that have been described, then sharing those skills with a wider audience serves the entire shooting community. It raises the profile of the sport and demonstrates the heights that dedicated practitioners can achieve." Sarah found herself trapped in a carefully constructed scenario. Accepting the challenge meant submitting to what amounted to a public examination of her abilities, with media coverage that would either validate or discredit her skills before a much larger audience. Declining meant accepting the implication that she lacked confidence in her abilities and couldn't perform under pressure. "I need time to consider this," Sarah said finally. "Of course. But I should mention that we're planning to make the announcement about the Special Masters Challenge next week. If you're going to participate, we'll need confirmation soon so we can include your involvement in the publicity materials." After ending the call, Sarah sat in her office contemplating the situation that had developed around her simple demonstration of marksmanship skills. What had begun as a response to dismissive treatment at a local shooting range had somehow escalated into a regional challenge with media coverage and public scrutiny. She understood the dynamics at work. Her story had spread through shooting communities where female participation was relatively uncommon, and extraordinary achievement by women was often met with skepticism. Rather than accepting that she possessed legitimate world-class skills, some members of that community preferred to believe that her success had been somehow artificial or circumstantial. The Masters Challenge represented an attempt to either validate those suspicions or force her to prove her abilities under conditions designed to be as difficult as possible. It was a test that most competitive shooters would find challenging, presented as though it should be routine for someone of her reported capabilities. Sarah's decision would ultimately depend on whether she was willing to subject herself to public scrutiny in order to definitively establish her credentials. The alternative was to continue practicing her skills quietly, ignoring the questions and implications that would follow her refusal to participate. She spent the rest of the morning researching the Southwest Regional Shooting Association and Marcus Webb's background. What she discovered reinforced her suspicions about the motivations behind his invitation. The association was a legitimate organization, but Webb himself had a history of organizing competitions that emphasized spectacle over pure sporting merit. His events typically featured unusual challenges, dramatic presentations, and extensive media coverage. More importantly, Sarah found records of previous special challenges that Webb had arranged. In each case, the challenged individual had been someone whose achievements had generated skeptical commentary within the shooting community. The pattern suggested that Webb specialized in creating situations where skilled shooters were pressured to prove themselves under increasingly difficult conditions. The outcomes of these previous challenges were mixed. Some participants had succeeded and earned widespread recognition for their abilities. Others had failed to meet the heightened expectations, seeing their reputations damaged by public demonstrations that highlighted their limitations rather than their genuine skills. Sarah recognized that she was being drawn into a system designed to monetize controversy and skepticism. Her achievements were being questioned not because the evidence was insufficient, but because her success challenged assumptions about who should be capable of such excellence. The Masters Challenge was an opportunity for the shooting community to either acknowledge her abilities or dismiss them based on a single high-pressure performance. By midday, Sarah had made her decision. She would accept Webb's challenge, but on her own terms. If the shooting community wanted to evaluate her skills under official conditions, she would provide them with a demonstration that would leave no room for further questions or implications. She called Webb back and informed him of her acceptance, but insisted on specific conditions. The competition would be conducted according to standard shooting sports protocols, with certified judges and documented results. She would pay her own entry fees and expenses, eliminating any suggestion that she was receiving special treatment. Most importantly, the media coverage would focus on the technical aspects of marksmanship rather than personal drama or controversy. Webb agreed to her conditions, though his tone suggested that he had hoped for a more dramatic presentation. The announcement of Sarah's participation was made the following week, generating exactly the kind of attention that Webb had anticipated. Shooting forums buzzed with discussion of the upcoming competition, much of it focused on whether Sarah would be able to maintain her reported level of performance under more challenging conditions. The weeks leading up to the Masters Challenge were unlike anything Sarah had experienced in her shooting career. Media interviews, profile articles, and online discussions dissected every aspect of her background, training methods, and previous achievements. She found herself thrust into the role of spokesperson for female participation in shooting sports, a position she had never sought and wasn't entirely comfortable occupying. The attention brought both support and criticism. Women shooters from around the country reached out to express encouragement and share their own experiences with dismissive treatment in male-dominated shooting environments. Simultaneously, skeptical voices questioned whether her academic background translated to practical shooting skills, suggesting that theoretical knowledge couldn't substitute for the kind of intuitive marksmanship that came from years of competitive experience. Sarah used the preparation time to refine her skills across the range of challenges she would face. The Masters Challenge required proficiency in areas that she had practiced but never emphasized: rapid target engagement, tactical decision-making, and shooting under time pressure. Her usual methodical approach would need to be adapted for scenarios that demanded quick reflexes and instant adaptability. She also studied the specific conditions she would encounter at the competition venue. The Albuquerque International Shooting Complex was a state-of-the-art facility designed to host major competitions, with controlled lighting, standardized target systems, and environmental monitoring that eliminated many of the variables present at outdoor ranges. The controlled conditions would provide the most accurate possible evaluation of pure shooting skill. As the competition date approached, Sarah reflected on how far the situation had escalated from her original goal of simply accessing range facilities at Precision Valley. What had begun as a response to dismissive treatment had become a public examination of her abilities, with implications that extended far beyond her personal reputation. The night before the Masters Challenge, Sarah received a call from Duke Morrison at Precision Valley. His voice carried a mixture of pride and concern as he checked on her preparation for the competition. "Dr. Chen, I just wanted you to know that everyone here at the range is pulling for you tomorrow. What happened here 3 weeks ago opened a lot of eyes, and I hope you know that you've got support from people who understand what real shooting looks like." Sarah appreciated the sentiment, recognizing that Duke's perspective had been genuinely changed by witnessing her abilities. His call represented the positive outcome that could result from challenging assumptions and demonstrating competence in the face of skepticism. "Thank you, Duke. I appreciate the support. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm glad that our interaction led to a better understanding of what expertise can look like. Ma'am, I've been running shooting ranges for 20 years, and I've never seen anyone shoot like you did that day. Don't let anybody tell you that what you accomplished wasn't extraordinary. And don't let them pressure you into thinking you have to prove it over and over again." After ending the call, Sarah spent the evening reviewing her preparation and visualizing the challenges she would face the following day. The Masters Challenge would test every aspect of her marksmanship skills, from the technical precision required for long-range shooting to the adaptability needed for unexpected scenarios. But more than that, it would test her ability to perform under the intense scrutiny of people who had already decided what they expected to see. Success would require not just exceptional shooting skills, but the mental fortitude to ignore pressure and focus on the technical execution of each shot. Sarah understood that she was competing against more than just targets and time limits. She was competing against assumptions, stereotypes, and the comfortable belief that extraordinary achievement must conform to expected patterns. Her performance would either shatter those assumptions or provide evidence that they had been justified all along. The stakes extended beyond her personal reputation. Other women in shooting sports were watching to see whether excellence would be recognized and respected, or whether even perfect performance could be dismissed and minimized. Her participation in the Masters Challenge had become a test case for how the shooting community would respond to achievement that didn't fit traditional expectations. As Sarah prepared for sleep, she reminded herself of the fundamental principle that had guided her throughout her career. Competence speaks for itself, but only if given the opportunity to be heard. Tomorrow's competition would provide that opportunity in the most public and definitive way possible. The Masters Challenge would determine not just whether she could maintain her level of performance under pressure, but whether the shooting community was ready to acknowledge excellence regardless of its source. The 50 targets she would face represented more than just a shooting competition. They were a test of whether skill and dedication would be valued above superficial assumptions about who deserved recognition and respect. Sarah fell asleep that night with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent years developing abilities that few people could match. Tomorrow would reveal whether those abilities would be recognized or dismissed, celebrated or minimized. But regardless of the outcome, she would demonstrate the same technical precision and methodical excellence that had defined her approach to every challenge throughout her career. The story that had begun with 20 clay pigeons at a desert shooting range was about to reach its most significant chapter, with implications that would resonate throughout the shooting community long after the final target had been engaged. The Albuquerque International Shooting Complex buzzed with an energy that felt more like a heavyweight boxing match than a marksmanship competition. Sarah Chen arrived at the facility 2 hours before the scheduled start of the Masters Challenge, hoping to acclimate herself to the environment and complete her preparation without the distraction of crowds and media attention. Her plan proved overly optimistic. Television trucks lined the parking area, their satellite dishes reaching toward the morning sky like technological flowers seeking signal instead of sunlight. Camera crews tested equipment while reporters practiced their opening segments, many of them clearly unfamiliar with the technical aspects of competitive shooting, but drawn by the human interest story of a quiet physicist who had challenged the assumptions of an entire sporting community. Sarah made her way through the crowd with the purposeful stride of someone who had learned to navigate attention without being consumed by it. She wore the same practical clothing that had served her at Precision Valley: cargo pants, a simple polo shirt, and hiking boots that provided stable footing on various surfaces. Her equipment bag remained the same worn canvas messenger bag that had prompted so much initial skepticism about her qualifications. The competition venue itself was impressive in its scope and technical sophistication. 5 distinct shooting areas had been configured to test different aspects of marksmanship, each with its own target systems, environmental controls, and monitoring equipment. Range safety officers moved between the stations, conducting final inspections and calibrating the electronic scoring systems that would document every shot with precise accuracy. Marcus Webb approached Sarah as she signed in at the registration table, his expression carrying the careful enthusiasm of an event organizer who had successfully created the spectacle he had envisioned. Webb wore tactical clothing that suggested serious involvement in shooting sports, though Sarah noticed that his gear emphasized appearance over functionality. Dr. Chen, welcome to what I believe will be the most significant marksmanship demonstration in regional history, Webb announced, his voice carrying enough volume to ensure that nearby media representatives could hear his comments. Are you feeling confident about the challenges we've prepared? Sarah completed her paperwork before responding, using the time to observe the dynamics developing around the competition. She could see clusters of shooters who had clearly come to witness what they expected to be either a remarkable demonstration of skill or a public deflation of an inflated reputation. The division between supporters and skeptics was visible in their body language and conversation patterns. Mr. Webb, I'm prepared to demonstrate the same marksmanship abilities that I've developed over many years of practice. The specific format of your challenges doesn't change the fundamental techniques of accurate shooting. Webb smiled, though there was something calculating in his expression. Excellent attitude. I should mention that we've had to make some adjustments to the original challenge parameters. Given the level of interest in your participation, we've enhanced several of the scenarios to ensure that the evaluation is as comprehensive as possible. Sarah felt a familiar tightening in her stomach, recognizing the pattern of moving goalposts that she had encountered throughout her career. Challenges had a way of becoming more difficult when the people issuing them realized that their original parameters might be achievable. "What kind of adjustments?" she asked. "Nothing that should concern someone of your reported abilities," Webb replied quickly. "We've increased the target distances slightly, added some environmental factors to simulate real-world conditions, and introduced a few surprise elements to test adaptability. The fundamental skills being evaluated remain the same." Sarah nodded, though she understood that Webb's minor adjustments would likely represent significant increases in difficulty. The pattern was familiar from academic conferences, where her research presentations were subjected to increasingly complex questions designed to find the limits of her expertise. She spent the next hour familiarizing herself with the modified challenge parameters while other competitors arrived and began their own preparations. The field of participants included several nationally ranked shooters, former military snipers, and competitive marksmen whose reputations had been built over decades of documented achievement. Sarah recognized that she was the only participant whose presence was based on a single, albeit perfect, demonstration of skill. The first challenge station tested precision rifle accuracy at extended distances. What had originally been described as 600-yard shots had been extended to 800 yards, with targets that had been reduced in size to emphasize the importance of technical precision. Sarah studied the conditions through a spotting scope, noting the wind patterns and atmospheric factors that would affect bullet trajectory over such distances. The targets themselves were standard competitive shooting bullseyes, but mounted on stands that introduced subtle movement, designed to simulate the minor oscillations present in real-world long-range shooting scenarios. Success would require not just accurate shooting, but the ability to time shots to coincide with the optimal moments in the target's movement cycle. Sarah set up her rifle at the firing point, making careful adjustments to her scope based on the measured distance and environmental conditions. Her Remington 700 looked distinctly utilitarian compared to the specialized precision rifles being used by other competitors, many of which featured custom barrels, adjustable stocks, and optics that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. The range safety officer called for the first relay of shooters to prepare for the precision challenge. Sarah found herself paired with David Kowalski, a former Marine sniper whose competition credentials included multiple national championships and several military marksmanship records. Kowalski glanced at Sarah's equipment with the professional assessment of someone who understood the technical requirements of long-range shooting. "Ma'am, that's a nice hunting rifle, but these targets are going to require some serious precision. The movement patterns and distance make this one of the more challenging shots you'll encounter today." Sarah appreciated that Kowalski's tone was respectful rather than dismissive, suggesting that he was offering genuine advice rather than psychological intimidation. His comment also revealed the level of difficulty that Webb had introduced with his minor adjustments. "I understand the challenges," Sarah replied, settling into her shooting position. "My rifle may look basic, but it's capable of the accuracy required for these targets." The command to commence firing echoed across the range, and Sarah began her methodical approach to long-range precision shooting. Through her scope, the distant target appeared as a small circle with scoring rings that demanded perfect shot placement. The subtle movement of the target stand created a rhythm that required careful observation and timing. Sarah's first shot struck the target in the 9 ring, slightly off-center due to a momentary shift in wind direction that she had miscalculated. The electronic scoring system registered the hit immediately, displaying the results on monitors visible to competitors and spectators. Around her, other shooters were achieving similar results, with most shots falling in the 8 and 9 rings. She adjusted her wind compensation for the second shot, taking into account the increased velocity of the crosswind that had developed as the morning progressed. The shot landed in the 10 ring, earning approving nods from the range safety officers who were monitoring the competition. By the 5th shot, Sarah had established a rhythm that allowed her to consistently compensate for both the environmental factors and the target's movement pattern. Her shots were grouping tightly in the center of the target, demonstrating the kind of technical precision that separated exceptional shooters from merely competent ones. Kowalski, shooting at the adjacent position, was achieving similar results with his specialized competition rifle. His decades of experience were evident in his smooth technique and consistent shot placement. As they completed the 10-shot precision challenge, both shooters had achieved scores that would be considered excellent under normal circumstances. Sarah's total score for the precision phase was 96 out of a possible 100 points, with 8 shots in the 10 ring and 2 in the 9 ring. Kowalski had achieved 98 points, missing the perfect score by a single point on one shot. The results established both shooters as serious contenders for the overall Masters Challenge victory. The second challenge phase involved clay pigeon shooting, but Webb's modifications had transformed it from a standard trap shooting scenario into something far more complex. Instead of clay pigeons launched from a single trap house at predictable angles, the targets were released from multiple launch points positioned around a semicircular range. The clays followed crossing flight paths that created opportunities for spectacular simultaneous shots, but also introduced the possibility of complete misses when timing was imperfect. Sarah observed the target patterns during the demonstration phase, noting that the multiple launch points created windows of opportunity when several clay pigeons would be airborne simultaneously. The challenge was designed to test not just marksmanship accuracy, but strategic thinking and the ability to prioritize targets based on their flight paths and interception possibilities. When her turn came, Sarah positioned herself at the center of the semicircular range with a clear view of all potential target areas. She had loaded her rifle with ammunition specifically chosen for its ballistic characteristics and aerial shooting, rounds that would provide optimal performance against fast-moving targets at various distances. The first clay pigeon launched from her left, following a high arc that would bring it across her field of view in approximately 3 seconds. Sarah tracked its flight path while simultaneously listening for the mechanical sounds that would indicate additional launches from other positions. The second clay launched just as she fired her first shot, creating an overlapping engagement scenario that required rapid target transition. The first clay pigeon exploded in a shower of orange fragments while Sarah was already tracking the second target. Her shot timing was precise, allowing her to engage the second clay at the optimal point in its trajectory. Both targets were destroyed within a span of 4 seconds, demonstrating the kind of rapid target engagement that characterized advanced aerial shooting. As the challenge continued, Sarah found herself facing increasingly complex scenarios. Multiple clay pigeons launched simultaneously from different positions, creating opportunities for sequential shots but also demanding perfect prioritization and timing. She adapted her strategy for each wave of targets, sometimes focusing on individual clays with high precision, other times attempting to engage multiple targets in rapid succession. Her performance in the clay pigeon phase was flawless. 10 separate target presentations, each involving multiple clay pigeons launched in complex patterns, and Sarah destroyed every target she engaged. Her shot selection showed tactical wisdom, choosing to engage targets that offered the highest probability of success while avoiding risky shots that might result in misses. The crowd of spectators and media representatives began to take notice of Sarah's consistent excellence. Her unassuming appearance and basic equipment had initially suggested that she might struggle with the more demanding challenges, but her actual performance was demonstrating world-class marksmanship skills that exceeded the abilities of most competitive shooters. The third challenge phase introduced tactical shooting scenarios designed to simulate real-world applications of marksmanship skills. Targets were positioned at various distances and angles, some partially concealed behind barriers, others requiring shots from awkward positions that tested both accuracy and adaptability. The scenarios were timed, adding pressure that eliminated the luxury of extended preparation and careful calculation. Sarah approached the tactical phase with the same methodical precision that had characterized her performance in the previous challenges. Each scenario required rapid assessment of multiple factors: target priority, optimal shooting positions, ammunition management, and time constraints. Her academic background in physics provided advantages in calculating angles and trajectories, but the tactical applications demanded intuitive decision-making that went beyond theoretical knowledge. The first tactical scenario involved engaging 5 targets positioned at distances ranging from 50 to 300 yards, with a time limit of 60 seconds. Sarah had to move between 3 different shooting positions, engaging targets from prone, kneeling, and standing positions while managing her ammunition and maintaining awareness of the time constraints. She completed the scenario in 42 seconds with perfect accuracy, hitting all 5 targets in their designated scoring zones. Her movement between positions was efficient and purposeful, demonstrating familiarity with tactical shooting principles that surprised observers who had expected her expertise to be limited to precision marksmanship. The subsequent tactical scenarios increased in complexity, introducing moving targets, multiple target arrays, and scenarios that required shooting around barriers or from compromised positions. Sarah adapted to each challenge with the flexibility that characterized truly elite shooters, maintaining her accuracy while demonstrating tactical awareness that suggested extensive practical experience. By the completion of the tactical phase, Sarah had achieved perfect scores on all scenarios. Her performance was generating serious discussion among the competitive shooters who had initially viewed her participation as a publicity stunt. The combination of precision, speed, and tactical adaptability she was demonstrating represented the highest level of marksmanship excellence. The fourth challenge phase tested practical shooting skills through a complex course that combined accuracy, speed, and decision-making under pressure. Competitors moved through a series of stations, engaging targets of different sizes and types while navigating obstacles and managing ammunition. The course was designed to simulate the kind of comprehensive shooting skills that characterized elite competitive shooters. Sarah's approach to the practical shooting course reflected her systematic method of analyzing complex problems. She studied the course layout during the walkthrough period, identifying optimal routes between stations and calculating the most efficient engagement sequences for each target array. Her academic training in optimization theory provided advantages in route planning that complemented her marksmanship skills. When the timer started, Sarah moved through the course with smooth efficiency. Her transitions between stations were quick and purposeful, her target engagements were precise and decisive, and her ammunition management was flawless. She completed the course with a time that placed her among the top performers while maintaining perfect accuracy on all targets. The practical shooting phase demonstrated that Sarah's expertise extended beyond pure marksmanship to encompass the broader skill set that characterized complete shooters. Her performance was impressive not just for its accuracy, but for the tactical intelligence and strategic thinking that informed her approach to complex shooting challenges. As the competition moved toward its final phase, the atmosphere at the Albuquerque International Shooting Complex had shifted dramatically. What had begun as a spectacle designed to either validate or deflate Sarah's reputation had become a demonstration of marksmanship excellence that was forcing observers to reconsider their assumptions about expertise and achievement. The final challenge phase was Webb's Chaos Round, designed to test adaptability and skill under completely unpredictable conditions. Competitors would face a series of shooting scenarios without advanced knowledge of the specific requirements, forcing them to rely on fundamental skills and the ability to adapt quickly to unexpected situations. Sarah waited at the final shooting station with the quiet confidence of someone who had consistently exceeded every expectation placed before her. Her performance through the first 4 phases had been virtually flawless, establishing her as not just a competent shooter, but as someone whose abilities rivaled those of the most accomplished competitive marksmen in the region. The Chaos Round began with a scenario that epitomized Webb's approach to creating challenging shooting situations. Sarah found herself facing a complex target array that combined elements from all the previous challenges: precision targets at long range, moving clay pigeons, tactical scenarios requiring rapid engagement, and practical shooting elements that demanded speed and accuracy simultaneously. The targets were presented in rapid succession with time constraints that eliminated any possibility of extended preparation. Sarah had to engage long-range precision targets while clay pigeons were launching, then transition to tactical targets that appeared and disappeared on unpredictable schedules, all while managing her ammunition and maintaining awareness of the overall time limit. Her response to the Chaos Round demonstrated why true expertise transcends specific technical skills. Sarah adapted to each new challenge with the fluid intelligence of someone whose understanding of marksmanship principles allowed her to excel regardless of the specific scenario. Her shots were precise, her transitions were smooth, and her decision-making remained sound even under the most challenging conditions. When the final shot of the Chaos Round was fired, Sarah had achieved what many observers considered impossible. She had completed all 5 phases of the Master's Challenge, with a combined score that not only exceeded Webb's most optimistic projections for her performance, but established a new facility record for overall excellence. The official results were announced with the formal ceremony that Webb had envisioned for his media event, but the context had changed completely. Instead of either validating or deflating a questionable reputation, the Master's Challenge had documented the existence of marksmanship abilities that few people had believed possible. Sarah's final score was 496 out of a possible 500 points, a level of performance that exceeded the achievements of shooters who had been competing professionally for decades. More significantly, her consistency across all 5 challenge phases demonstrated the kind of comprehensive expertise that could only result from years of dedicated practice and genuine mastery of shooting principles. The reactions to Sarah's performance varied dramatically depending on the observer's original expectations. Supporters who had believed in her abilities from the beginning felt vindicated by her success. Skeptics who had expected her to fail under pressure found themselves forced to acknowledge that their assumptions had been completely wrong. Marcus Webb approached Sarah as she was packing her equipment, his expression carrying a mixture of amazement and something that might have been embarrassment. The spectacle he had created to test her abilities had instead provided a platform for one of the most impressive marksmanship demonstrations in regional history. Dr. Chen, I have to admit that your performance today exceeded every expectation I had when I organized this challenge. What you've accomplished here will be remembered as one of the finest exhibitions of shooting skill ever documented at this facility. Sarah finished securing her rifle in its case before responding, her expression remaining as composed as it had been throughout the competition. Mr. Webb, I demonstrated the same abilities today that I've possessed for many years. The difference is that today you provided conditions that allowed those abilities to be properly documented and witnessed. Webb nodded, though his expression suggested he was still processing the implications of what he had witnessed. I have to ask, where did you develop these skills? Your performance today rivals that of Olympic-level competitive shooters, but you're not associated with any of the traditional training programs or competitive circuits. I developed these skills the same way anyone develops expertise in a technical discipline, Sarah replied, through study, practice, and dedication to continuous improvement. The specific environment where that development occurs is less important than the commitment to excellence. The media interviews that followed Sarah's record-setting performance focused on the broader implications of what had been witnessed. Her achievement challenged comfortable assumptions about expertise, demonstrated the importance of evaluating people based on their actual abilities rather than superficial characteristics, and highlighted the danger of dismissing accomplishment that didn't conform to expected patterns. David Kowalski, the former Marine sniper who had competed alongside Sarah in the precision phase, provided commentary that captured the significance of her performance. What Dr. Chen accomplished today represents the highest level of marksmanship skill I've encountered in 20 years of competitive shooting. Her consistency across such a diverse range of challenges demonstrates mastery that goes far beyond technical competence. The ripple effects of Sarah's Masters Challenge performance spread through shooting communities across the region and beyond. Video footage of her competition was shared through social media networks, generating discussions about expertise, assumptions, and the importance of recognizing achievement regardless of its source. Women in shooting sports found themselves part of conversations about capability and opportunity that extended far beyond marksmanship. Sarah's demonstration that world-class skills could exist without traditional credentials or recognition patterns opened doors for other female shooters who had been marginalized or dismissed based on superficial judgments. Training facilities began reassessing their approaches to evaluating new members and students. The lesson that expertise could present itself quietly, without aggressive self-promotion or expensive equipment displays, led to more thoughtful assessment methods that focused on actual abilities rather than surface impressions. Competitive shooting organizations initiated discussions about inclusivity and recognition that addressed systemic biases and how achievement was identified and celebrated. Sarah's story became a case study in the importance of providing opportunities for all participants to demonstrate their capabilities under fair and appropriate conditions. The transformation extended beyond shooting sports to influence broader conversations about expertise recognition and technical fields. Sarah's experience resonated with women in engineering, science, and other disciplines, where competence was often questioned or dismissed based on gender-based assumptions rather than actual performance. 6 months after the Masters Challenge, Sarah received an invitation that represented the ultimate vindication of her abilities. The United States Olympic shooting team requested her participation in a training camp designed to identify and develop candidates for international competition. Her Masters Challenge performance had generated attention from national-level coaches who recognized world-class potential when they encountered it. Sarah's decision to accept the Olympic training invitation represented more than personal achievement. Her participation in elite-level shooting programs would provide visible representation for women who possessed exceptional abilities but had been overlooked by traditional identification and development systems. The transformation of her story from local range incident to international recognition illustrated the power of persistence and excellence in overcoming systemic barriers. Sarah had never sought attention or recognition. She had simply insisted on being evaluated based on her actual abilities rather than superficial assumptions about her potential. The shooting range where her journey had begun underwent its own transformation. Precision Valley became known as a facility that recognized and nurtured talent regardless of how it presented itself. Duke Morrison implemented training programs specifically designed to identify and develop exceptional shooters who might be overlooked by more traditional approaches. The 20 clay pigeons that Sarah had hit perfectly on that first Sunday morning had become symbols of something larger than marksmanship achievement. They represented the shattering of assumptions, the recognition of quiet excellence, and the importance of providing opportunities for all individuals to demonstrate their true capabilities. Sarah's story continued to resonate because it addressed universal experiences of being underestimated, dismissed, or overlooked, despite possessing genuine expertise. Her methodical approach to proving her abilities provided a model for others facing similar challenges in their own fields and circumstances. The Masters Challenge had been designed to test Sarah's skills under the most demanding conditions possible. Instead, it had tested the shooting community's willingness to recognize excellence regardless of its source. Sarah had passed her test with flying colors. The community's performance had been more mixed, but the experience had initiated conversations and changes that would benefit future generations of shooters. As Sarah prepared for her Olympic training camp, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from a dismissed range member to a potential international competitor. The path had required not just exceptional marksmanship skills, but the courage to insist on fair evaluation and the persistence to prove her abilities despite skeptical audiences. Her story served as a reminder that expertise exists in many forms and that the wisest approach is to evaluate individuals based on their demonstrated capabilities rather than preconceived notions about what competence should look like. The targets she had hit were more than clay pigeons and paper bullseyes. They were barriers that had prevented recognition of her true abilities. The months following Sarah Chen's record-breaking performance at the Masters Challenge brought changes that rippled through the shooting sports community, like waves from a stone dropped in still water. Her achievement had done more than establish new facility records. It had fundamentally altered how excellence was recognized and nurtured within a community that had long operated on assumptions rather than evidence-based evaluation. The Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs represented the pinnacle of competitive shooting development in the United States. Sarah arrived at the facility on a crisp October morning, carrying the same worn canvas equipment bag that had accompanied her through every significant milestone of her shooting career. The contrast between her modest appearance and the high-tech environment of the training center was immediately apparent to the coaches and athletes who would become her teammates and mentors. Head coach Elena Vasquez had spent 15 years developing Olympic-level shooters, and her experience had taught her to recognize potential in forms that others might overlook. Sarah's Masters Challenge performance had caught her attention not just for its technical excellence, but for the consistency and adaptability it demonstrated across such a diverse range of shooting disciplines. Dr. Chen, Coach Vasquez said during their initial meeting, "Your competition scores indicate abilities that typically take decades to develop. I'm curious about your training background and the methods you use to achieve such comprehensive marksmanship skills." Sarah found herself in the familiar position of explaining expertise that had developed outside traditional channels. Her shooting skills had been honed through personal practice and scientific study, rather than formal coaching or competitive programs. The combination of theoretical knowledge and practical application had created abilities that were exceptional but unconventional. Coach Vasquez, "My approach to marksmanship development was based on treating shooting as an engineering problem. I studied ballistics, atmospheric effects, and human biomechanics, then applied that knowledge through systematic practice designed to optimize performance across multiple variables." The coach nodded thoughtfully. Olympic-level shooting required exactly this kind of technical understanding combined with practical skill. Sarah's academic background in physics provided advantages that many competitive shooters spent years trying to develop through experience and intuition. The training camp brought together 12 of the most promising shooters in the country, each representing different disciplines and approaches to competitive marksmanship. Sarah found herself working alongside athletes who had been identified and developed through traditional pathways, junior shooting programs, collegiate teams, and regional competitive circuits. Her integration into this elite group provided insights into how exceptional ability was typically recognized and cultivated. Most of her fellow trainees had been competing seriously since their teenage years, accumulating records and recognition through established systems that rewarded consistent participation and gradual improvement. Sarah's path had been different, but equally valid. Her late entry into competitive shooting was offset by the sophisticated understanding of marksmanship principles that her scientific background provided. While other shooters had developed their skills through repetition and coaching, Sarah had approached the discipline with analytical methods that accelerated her learning and optimization processes. The technical aspects of Olympic-level training revealed new dimensions of shooting sports that Sarah had not previously encountered. The precision required for international competition exceeded even the demanding standards of the Masters Challenge, requiring consistency and accuracy that could only be achieved through perfect technique and mental discipline. Sarah's first week at the training center focused on precision rifle events, where her academic understanding of ballistics provided immediate advantages. She worked with specialized equipment that cost more than most people's annual salaries, rifles and optics systems, engineered to eliminate every possible source of error except shooter technique. The targets used in Olympic competition were smaller and more demanding than anything Sarah had encountered in her previous shooting experience. Success required not just accuracy but the ability to maintain that accuracy under the pressure of international competition where fractions of points determined medal outcomes. Coach Vasquez monitored Sarah's adaptation to Olympic-level training with growing appreciation for her technical approach to marksmanship challenges. Her systematic method of analyzing and optimizing each aspect of shooting technique was producing rapid improvements in areas where other athletes required months of gradual development. Sarah, the coach observed during a particularly successful training session, your ability to identify and correct technical issues sets you apart from most competitive shooters. You approach each shot as a scientific experiment rather than just hoping for good results. This analytical approach became Sarah's signature strength throughout the training camp. While other athletes relied primarily on muscle memory and intuitive adjustments, Sarah combined those traditional skills with conscious analysis of variables that affected shot placement and consistency. The training center's advanced monitoring systems documented every aspect of Sarah's performance, creating datasets that revealed the mathematical precision underlying her shooting technique. Her shot groups demonstrated consistency that approached the theoretical limits of the equipment being used, suggesting that her human performance was optimized to a degree rarely seen in competitive shooting. Sarah's presence at the training camp generated discussions among coaches and sports scientists about talent identification and development methodologies. Her late entry into competitive shooting, combined with her exceptional performance levels, challenged assumptions about how elite athletes should be identified and cultivated. Traditional talent identification programs focused on young athletes who demonstrated natural aptitude and competitive drive through junior programs and scholastic competitions. Sarah's path suggested that exceptional ability could develop through different channels, requiring evaluation systems that looked beyond conventional markers of potential. Dr. Michael Harrison, the training center's sports psychologist, found Sarah's mental approach to competition particularly interesting. Her scientific background had provided her with analytical tools that helped her maintain focus and consistency under pressure, skills that other athletes developed through years of competitive experience. Sarah's approach to managing competitive stress is unique among the athletes I work with, Dr. Harrison observed. She treats pressure as another variable to be analyzed and controlled, rather than an emotional challenge to be overcome through willpower alone. This technical approach to mental preparation became one of Sarah's most valuable contributions to the training environment. Her methods for maintaining focus and consistency were studied and adapted by other team members, creating improvements in their own competitive performance. The social dynamics of the training camp reflected broader changes happening within shooting sports communities. Sarah's presence forced conversations about inclusivity and recognition that extended beyond individual achievement to address systemic issues affecting participation and development opportunities. Female athletes at the training center found themselves part of discussions about representation and opportunity that had been initiated by Sarah's story. Her journey from dismissed range member to Olympic candidate provided inspiration for women facing similar challenges in their own competitive careers. The ripple effects of Sarah's Masters Challenge performance continued to generate changes in shooting sports organizations throughout the country. Range facilities began implementing evaluation methods that focused on demonstrated ability rather than superficial impressions, leading to the identification of talented shooters who had previously been overlooked. Precision Valley Shooting Range had become something of a pilgrimage destination for people interested in Sarah's story. Duke Morrison found himself fielding requests from journalists, documentary filmmakers, and other shooters who wanted to understand the environment where her abilities had first been recognized. The transformation of Duke's perspective had been genuine and lasting. His experience with Sarah had taught him to look beyond surface appearances when evaluating new members and their potential capabilities. The range implemented training programs specifically designed to identify and nurture exceptional talent regardless of how it presented itself. What happened with Dr. Chen taught me that expertise doesn't always announce itself loudly, Duke reflected during one of many interviews about the incident. Some of the most capable people are also the most modest about their abilities. My job is to create an environment where everyone gets a fair chance to show what they can do. The changes at Precision Valley became a model for other shooting facilities interested in fostering more inclusive and effective approaches to talent recognition. Training materials and evaluation protocols developed at the range were shared throughout regional shooting communities, spreading Sarah's influence far beyond her original interactions with the facility. Marcus Webb's Southwest Regional Shooting Association underwent its own transformation following the Masters Challenge. The event had been designed as a test of Sarah's abilities, but the outcome had provided lessons about the importance of fair evaluation and the dangers of allowing skepticism to override evidence. Webb himself had learned valuable lessons about organizing competitions that served the shooting community rather than just generating spectacle. His subsequent events emphasized skill development and recognition rather than controversy and drama, creating more positive environments for competitive shooting. The media coverage of Sarah's Olympic training generated national attention for shooting sports in ways that emphasized technical excellence and scientific precision rather than just recreational aspects of firearms use. Her story provided a positive narrative that helped broaden public understanding of competitive marksmanship as a legitimate athletic discipline. Television coverage of Sarah's training sessions showcased the sophisticated technology and rigorous preparation required for Olympic-level shooting. Viewers gained appreciation for the mental discipline and technical expertise that elite marksmanship demanded, changing perceptions of shooting sports as simple recreational activities. Sarah's academic credentials added credibility to shooting sports that helped counter negative stereotypes and misconceptions. Her combination of scientific expertise and competitive excellence demonstrated that shooting could attract and develop the same kind of high-level talent found in other technical sports. The International Olympic Committee took notice of the attention that Sarah's story had generated for shooting sports in the United States. Her narrative of overcoming dismissal and discrimination to achieve excellence resonated with broader Olympic values of perseverance and achievement through dedication. Sarah's preparation for potential Olympic competition required adaptations that went beyond pure marksmanship skills. International competition involved cultural and linguistic challenges, travel demands, and media attention that she had not previously encountered in her shooting career. The psychological preparation for Olympic-level competition proved to be one of Sarah's greatest strengths. Her scientific approach to analyzing and controlling variables extended to managing the mental and emotional demands of high-stakes international competition. Training sessions at the Colorado Springs facility included simulations of Olympic competition conditions, complete with crowd noise, media attention, and the kind of pressure that could overwhelm athletes who were not properly prepared for the unique demands of representing their country in international competition. Sarah's performance under these simulated conditions demonstrated the same consistency and technical excellence that had characterized her shooting throughout her career. Her ability to maintain focus and execute precise shots, regardless of external distractions, confirmed her potential for success at the highest levels of international competition. The selection process for the United States Olympic shooting team was rigorous and comprehensive, evaluating not just current performance levels, but also potential for continued improvement and success under the unique pressures of Olympic competition. Sarah's trajectory from unknown quantity to serious Olympic candidate had been unprecedented in its speed and scope. Her development had occurred outside traditional pathways, but her results spoke to abilities that clearly merited consideration for the highest levels of international competition. Coach Vasquez found herself in the unusual position of recommending an athlete whose competitive resume was limited, but whose demonstrated abilities exceeded those of many shooters with decades of international experience. Sarah's case challenged selection criteria that emphasized competition history over current capability. The final selection decisions would depend on continued performance improvement and adaptation to international competition formats. Sarah's scientific approach to optimization provided confidence that she could make the necessary adjustments to succeed at Olympic levels. Her story had already achieved something significant, regardless of Olympic outcomes. Sarah had demonstrated that expertise could develop through unconventional paths, and that excellence deserved recognition regardless of its source or presentation. The shooting sports community had been transformed by her example, becoming more inclusive and effective at identifying and nurturing talent from diverse backgrounds and experiences. Her influence extended beyond individual achievement to create systemic changes that would benefit future generations of competitive shooters. Sarah's journey from dismissed range member to Olympic candidate illustrated the power of persistence and the importance of fair evaluation. Her story served as inspiration for anyone who had been underestimated or overlooked, despite possessing genuine abilities and dedication to excellence. The 20 clay pigeons she had destroyed at Precision Valley had become symbols of shattered assumptions and recognized potential. Her perfect performance had opened doors not just for herself, but for others who possessed exceptional abilities that had been hidden by superficial judgments and systemic biases. As Sarah continued her preparation for potential Olympic competition, she remained focused on the same principles that had guided her throughout her career: technical excellence, continuous improvement, and the quiet confidence that came from knowing her abilities were based on solid foundations of knowledge and practice. Her story continued to resonate because it addressed universal experiences while demonstrating that expertise and dedication could overcome even the most entrenched assumptions about who deserved recognition and opportunity. The targets she had hit were more than clay pigeons and paper bullseyes. They were barriers that had prevented the recognition of quiet excellence in all its forms. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.